it's becoming quite impossible to keep the population up with the bouncing ball, with the facts and what's going on in the world. One of the latest issues that's been going on for a while is the President of the United States, President Obama, continues to appeal to voters by warning them not to re-elect the ideology that got us into this mess. And that's a refrain that happens over and over. And just recently I saw an anti-Obama ad claiming the same thing. To get us out of this mess, you got to go against Obama. And so it's a typical deal where, a lot is said in few words to people who don't quite understand how that all worked. But it sounds good, and as long as you can get people nodding their head, I guess it works as a campaign slogan. But let's talk about the mess for a minute. There's several messes, and we're not going to cover them all, but just to try to get the juices flowing, the people might say, I think I need to understand the way the world works and maybe, sit down and learn something and figure it out. So I don't have to be told stuff by people who think in, a 9-second soundbite they can win me over to a position that may or may not be tenable and may or may not even be right. But it's unmistakable that there are three things that accompany messes. Willful stupidity, on which almost everyone is guilty. Cowardice, on which almost everyone is guilty. And greed, on which almost everyone is guilty. And certainly the two major political parties, the Republicans and the Democrats, are guilty across the board on all three of those. But we'll take some examples here. President Clinton, a Democrat, and President Bush 43, a Republican, sat idly by, regardless of which program started with under which president, and then this amendment and this, release, whichever. Those two presidents allowed mortgages to be given to people who could not afford them, all under the guise and hope that home ownership would increase and everyone would be happy. And those chickens came home to roost big time and totally crashed the economy beginning in 2006 and crescendoing in 2008, and the aftermath of which we still live deeply asunder in 2012, rolling to 2013, and perhaps forever. And those two presidents let that happen on their watch. Both sides sling mud as to who's to blame for it, and they're both to blame. That's just the way it is. Moving to another example. President Bush 43 added $5 trillion to the debt in his 8 years. President Obama, a Democrat, and Bush, of course, a Republican, President Obama has added $6 trillion in just 4 years. Together, they've added $11 trillion of the $16 trillion debt. Well, isn't that something? So those two separate parties have just squashed the country under mounds and mounds of unpayable debt that leave the nation choked out and ground out. And now what are they saying about each other? Exactly. Blah, blah, blah. Go ahead and talk to each other all you want, but the fact is, you're both to blame. And the issue of what got us into this mess is both parties cowardly, greedy, and willfully stupid. And that's how it will always be. What got us into this mess? Both parties. The wrestler, Jesse the Body Ventura, former governor of Minnesota, former Navy SEAL. He said years ago, nothing changes until you stop voting for Republicans and Democrats. But of course, everyone's too scared and too greedy and too willfully stupid to figure out the question, well, what would we do then? I don't know. I guess this is what you do. Make messes, blame the other side, and campaign on let's not repeat what got us into this mess. No wonder everything's 50-50. What a disaster.